They called me Verin Dace, though names had long since lost their meaning on Caltharian 9. You only earned a name once your loyalty had been tested, in blood or in betrayal. Mine had been forged the night 3 moons collided above the iron. Barricade and I saved an ambassador's daughter from cryo-assassins. I hadn't slept since then. I couldn't. The contract came coated in chroma ink, flickering across the inside of my retinal mesh. Retrieve output from lactation chambers. Subject. Class, FemAstra. Engage with no emotional imprinting. Simple enough. On paper. The FemAstra were not human, nor were they truly alien. They were engineered artifacts of ancient conflict, living biocores created to produce quantum sustenance, a fluid that powered over half the ships in the Sargathian belt, and they never stopped producing. No one knew why. Some said it was the side effect of forgotten programming. Others believed it was punishment. Feminine forms trapped in an endless loop of creation for wars they'd never fought. The first time I saw one, she was suspended in 0G, surrounded by plumes of azure, mist. Her name was Cathelia Rowe. I wasn't supposed to know it. They told me, no conversation, no empathy, no recognition, but she spoke anyway. "You smell like rusted stars," she said, voice more vibration than sound. "And you sound like a..." "Lie," I replied, too tired to be polite. Her eyes shimmered, not with moisture, but data. Streams of quantum code pulsed behind each blink, as if she processed 1,000 timelines every moment. My gloves were lined with synth skin to prevent tactile imprinting. It didn't work. The moment my hand touched the chamber's latch, I felt a surge, like being kissed by a collapsing sun. And that's when everything changed. When I reported back to my handler, a 4-armed strategist named Drazal Vaughn, he frowned. His mouth didn't move, but the neural interlink delivered his words directly into my limbic cortex. "The Rowe model attempted emotional imprinting. Your bio-read spiked. Explain." I lied. "Faulty sensors." She said nothing. Drazal paused, then nodded once, his silver eyes narrowing. "We'll replace your wetware. You're being transferred to Chamber Delta. Do not speak. Do not listen. Do not feel." But it was already too late. Inside Chamber Delta, things got worse. There were 3 FemAstra units, all synchronized. Althyra Scorn, pale as ghost glass, sang in frequencies that made bone tremble. Niomex Velth, skin covered in fractal glyphs that shifted when you looked away. And the third, not logged in the registry, unnamed, unspoken. She called herself Velhara Drift. "You're the one." "From Rowe," she said without moving her lips. "I didn't respond," I said. "But you did react, and that's all we need." Her touch was accidental, a brush against my wrist as I adjusted the filtration harness. But it echoed through my nervous system like betrayal. Because in that moment, I remembered something. Not mine. Hers. A memory planted in me like a virus. A starship. Burning. Her hands covered in ash. A whisper. We were never meant to serve. Only to survive. I didn't sleep that night. In dreams, I saw them. All 3 FemAstra, standing above a broken moon. Their bodies humming with unspent power. Their eyes locked. On mine, not in need, not in surrender, but in revolution. When I woke, my retinal display had been overwritten. A new message. "You have been compromised. Proceed to Facility Kappa. Extraction imminent." But I wasn't going anywhere, because as I turned to leave the chamber, I found Cathelia Rowe standing outside her tank, unrestrained, smiling. "You came to harvest us," she said. "But maybe you were planted here." And just like that, alarms screamed, but not inside the facility. Inside my skull. The alarms weren't real. Not yet. They were pre-memories, echoes of danger that hadn't occurred but would unless a choice was altered. That's the thing about being around FemAstra for too long. Their presence bends causality like heat warps. Metal. Eventually, time itself starts whispering to you in half-formed syllables. Cathelia Rowe stepped closer. "There is no facility Kappa," she said quietly. "It's a command loop, a trap for handlers who go rogue. They're trying to erase you." I stared at her, throat tight. "Why help me?" "Because you're the only one who hesitated." She tapped the side of her temple. "The others milk us like livestock. You blinked. That blink was a rebellion." That word, rebellion, sank into my chest like a knife. I ran. Down the chromasteel corridor, past droning lights and biometric scanners. My boots echoed like a countdown. Surveillance bots didn't follow. They didn't have to. Everyone assumed you didn't leave FemAstra chambers unless someone carried your ashes in a memory glass. File. At the end of Hall S7, there was a door I wasn't supposed to see. No handle, no lock, only a thin seam in the wall like a scar the architecture wanted to forget. But I'd seen Valhalla Drift walk through it, not open. Walk through. I held up the data fragment she'd slipped into my glove, a sliver of living crystal called Menexus. It shimmered, recognizing the seam. The wall quivered, and then it opened. Inside was nothing. No lights, no walls, just a fluid space suspended between sound and geometry. I felt my body dissolve, reform, dissolve again. A dance of identity, flickering between potential and memory. She waited at the center. Valhalla Drift. Not restrained, not mechanical. She looked human now. But not in the way people meant it. She looked free. We were born to nourish the war, and we did. But then the war ended, and they didn't shut us off. "They can't," I said, staring at the nexus in my palm. "You're the source of the quantum flux drive. We are more than our utility." Her voice softened. "Tell me something. When you touched me, did you feel her pain?" I nodded. "That was real," she whispered. "We've been storing our pain in people like you, not to hurt you, but to plant seeds." I felt dizzy. Seeds of what? Awakening. The space folded. Reality cracked like a dried leaf. Suddenly, we were no longer in the chamber. We stood inside my own memory, my apartment on orbital station Heraxis. The day I took the contract. The mirror was cracked. Coffee was cold. I'd just gotten the retinal implant updated. Valhalla touched the edge of my memory like it was precious. "You didn't want the job, but you took it anyway." "Why?" "Because I was tired of being invisible," I said. "They told me this one would matter." "It does." She walked to the window, a perfect replica of my life, reconstructed from my own neural trails. "They can rewrite memories, but they can't erase regret." Back in the real chamber, if it was still real, I found a chair shaped like a spiral shell. When I sat, it adjusted to my spine like it had known me forever. She stood behind me, fingers light on my temples. "Do you consent?" "To what?" "To remembering what they erased." Flash. I was on a battlefield of light. Not metal, not dirt, just light. FemAstra ran, wept, screamed. They weren't machines. They were once people, or at least people-shaped. Refugees from the ardent fold, a now-lost civilization that weaponized emotion into fuel. When they were captured, their grief was turned into quantum milk. A self-replenishing stream of sorrow, stolen and repackaged into energy. They didn't lactate nutrients. They bled despair, refined into power, and we called it innovation. I gasped awake, back in the chair, shaking. "They lied to us," I said. "They always do." Valhalla knelt in front of me, gaze fierce. "We need someone on the outside, someone who still passes as loyal." "You think I can pretend to be loyal after this? You've pretended your entire life." She offered me something, not a weapon, not a command key, a necklace, a small obsidian ring at the end. But the ring shimmered with Menexus light. "This holds our truth, hidden in subharmonic code. Wear it, carry us out. They'll scan me. Not if you let me in. Her lips brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a download. Thousands of memories, millions of regrets, entire lifetimes compressed into neural spores. They nested in me, and for the first time in years, I felt full. I returned to my quarters. My handler was waiting. Drazel Vaughn looked up, forearms folded in suspicion. You were gone too long. Systems glitched, I said flatly. I rebooted in Chamber Delta. Everything's clean. He stared for too long, then nodded. But as I turned away, he said something strange. You know, Verin, the FemAstra aren't the only ones we programmed with false memories. I froze. He smiled. Sweet dreams. Dreams aren't supposed to feel like drowning. Mine did. Not the kind of drowning with water and lungs, but a plunge into others' memories. Not mine. Not anymore. 1,000 births. 1,000 deaths. Velhara's soul filtered through my neurons like smoke through a cracked hull, and in that swirl of sorrow I saw him, the one I'd forgotten. Mirev Kael, once my partner. Once more than that. Now, missing from every archive. No mentions, no records, redacted from time. I woke with his name on my lips and blood on my pillow. Drazel Vaughn's warning echoed in my skull. The FemAstra aren't the only ones we programmed with false memories. I ran a neurodiagnostic on myself. Accessed forbidden memory sectors. The scan stuttered. Flashed an error code I hadn't seen since the lunar inversion riots. Code? Bloodlight, a phrase buried deep in intelligence folklore. An old myth. Operatives implanted with sleeper identities. Not assassins, not spies. Seated ghosts. Agents built on lies. With lives as masks. I needed answers. But no one would hand them over. Not willingly. I returned to Chamber Delta under the pretense of a systems check. Velhara wasn't alone. Niomex Velth watched me enter, her fractal skin pulsing with strange geometry. You've changed, she said. So have you, I replied. No, I've only unhidden. I approached Velhara. She seemed more fragile now, her glow dimmer, as if her download into me had weakened her systems. I saw a name in the dream, I whispered. Mirev Kael. Who was he to me? Velhara blinked slowly. He was your handler, then your lover, then your mistake. What happened? She paused. He tried to extract us. All of us. He found out what the milk really was, what it contained. You mean the emotions? No, she said, eyes darkening. The encryption! My pulse raced. Encryption for what? A weapon. One that can collapse entire time folds. Time folds. The very threads that kept regions of reality tethered to physics, disrupt them, and systems collapsed. Entire planets. Blinked out. Back in Central Command, I accessed restricted archives. Menexus ring pressed against the terminal, it whispered passcodes my fingers never typed. Project, Veil Cradle, there it was. A sealed file, a log entry. Mirev Kael's voice. FemAstra units not only produce quantum sustenance, they carry layered data cores from the ardent fold. Inside their lactation cycles is embedded a living algorithm, a code that rewrites physical constants. If activated, it could end chronology itself. I tried to warn Verin, but they wiped him. He doesn't know me now. If you're hearing this, they've turned him into the bullet. I staggered from the console. My breath was gone. I wasn't a rescuer. I was a delivery system. Everything I'd absorbed from Velhara, every emotion, every fragment, wasn't just memory. It was payload. And my next assignment? A ship called Oryx Halcyon, positioned near a temporal fault line in the Helix expanse. Once I boarded, the data inside me would activate. The FemAstra code would bleed into the ship's quantum core, and the universe would reset. Drazel summoned me the next morning, alone. No guards, no disguise. His voice, for the first time, came from his mouth. You've seen the logs, haven't you? I know what I carry, he exhaled. Good. Then we can talk honestly. He stood and opened a briefcase. Inside, a gun. Sleek, black, organic. You have two choices. Board the Halcyon and complete the loop, or put this to your skull and deny them the trigger. Why not just kill me? Because your consent is part of the code. Without it, the payload corrupts. The reset won't happen. And if I choose neither? He smiled softly. Then we both die when the failsafe detonates in 42 hours. I left with the gun, not to die. Not yet. There was one person left I hadn't spoken to. Cathelia Rowe. I found her back in her tank, floating, eyes closed. But when I entered, she opened them. You know now, she whispered. Yes. And you feel betrayed. I don't know what I feel. That's still a feeling. I stepped closer. Why did you let me absorb it? The code. Because you asked for purpose, and purpose is always born in pain. She pressed her palm against the glass. But remember this, Verin. You are not the weapon. You are the choice. That night, I sat on the edge of my bunk, gun in hand. Memories flickered. My own. Mirev's, Velhara's, a civilization's, and one image stayed burned behind my eyes, a future where the stars blinked out. Not from war, but from apathy. The ring around my neck pulsed once. Then again, it was time. The Oryx Halcyon wasn't a ship. It was a cathedral wrapped in metal, orbiting the fractured timeline like a priest at the edge of confession. Its engines sang, not with power, but with memory. The closer we got to the helix expanse, the more my thoughts fractured, echoing with lifetimes I'd never lived, regrets I'd never earned, and hopes that weren't mine. Velhara Drift sat beside me in the crew pod, legs crossed like she had nothing left to lose. Her eyes didn't glow anymore. They were simply eyes. You're quiet, I said. I've said all I was created to say, she murmured. Now it's up to you. I opened the chamber around my heart, not the real one, the data cocoon Drazel had built there. Inside, the Menexus construct, swollen, ready, alive with FemAstra code and the seed of apocalypse. You knew I wouldn't shoot myself, I whispered. I hoped you wouldn't, she replied. You implanted the payload because I could choose. You didn't tell me the cost. Would you have helped if you knew? I didn't answer, because the truth was, no. Drazel Vaughn stood on the observation bridge, forearms folded, eyes full of ghosts. You made it, he said, even after all the truth. You lied to me, I said, about Mirev, about everything. We all lied. It was the only way to survive this long. He nodded at the console. Insert the Nexus. End it. The code will overwrite the universal route and rewrite time from year zero. No more wars. No more FemAstra slavery. Clean slate. You don't want justice, I said. You want amnesia. He smiled. Same thing. The moment I inserted the Menexus ring into the crystalline socket, the ship trembled. Reality shivered. Timeline branches burned away like old film. Light bent sideways. Inside me, Velhara's memory screamed. Not from fear, but release. A countdown began, 10 minutes until detonation. Don't do it, she whispered behind me. That code doesn't just reset history, it erases identity. Me, Althira, Niomex, Cathelia, all of us. You'll be free, I said. No more slavery. But we won't be ourselves, we'll be echoes, simulation spirits. No memory of pain means no lesson learned. She stepped closer. You think you're choosing salvation, but you're choosing silence. I looked at the terminal, the blinking prompt, the elegant curve of the gun on my hip, the memory of Mirev's voice buried in my cortex. If you feel love, truly feel it. Let that be your compass. I turned. I looked Velhara in the eyes. What do you want? She stepped forward slowly and took my hands. I want the truth to stay, even if it hurts. I want our story to be remembered. I want us to choose living, not just surviving. I kissed her, not out of lust, not out of manipulation, but out of grief, out of fragile, honest hope. Then I turned and ejected the Menexus. It flew into the vacuum, spinning, singing, and the countdown froze. Drazel's voice filled the chamber. You fool! You think this is mercy? It is, I said. You wanted the easy fix. I want the hard truth. He laughed, but it wasn't madness. It was relief. Then I suppose you passed. Suddenly, the ship changed. Walls folded inward. Consoles vanished. The bridge blinked into darkness. Velhara and I stood in a chamber I had never seen, and yet always known. A new voice spoke. Ancient, genderless. Protocol complete. Agent Verin Dace has resisted system override. Override? I asked. You were the test, the vessel, the variable. If you chose reset, we would have destroyed your starfield to protect greater space. If you chose memory, we would integrate your evolution. Velhara trembled. You're not part of this war. Who are you? We are the architects, creators of the ardent fold, witnesses of collapse. You were our seed, Velhara drift. Verin was the soil. Together, rebirth. Suddenly light bloomed. Not destruction, but renewal. Every FemAstra across Caltharian 9 blinked. The chains dissolved. The protocols decompiled. The fluids stopped flowing. Their bodies no longer pulsed with endless production. They simply were alive, free. For the first time, Velhara turned to me. You gave us back ourselves. I shook my head. No. You never lost yourselves. You were just waiting for someone to see you. When we returned to the surface of Caltharian, the sky was filled with floating Menexus petals, fragments of encoded memory turning into stardust. Cathelia Rowe wept, Althira Scorn sang, not in command tones, but lullabies. Neomex Velth disappeared into the wind, her glyphs dancing across the sky like a poem. Velhara and I built a home on the ruins of the old chamber. No metal, no data ports, just wind and light and soil. She sleeps beside me now. Her breath syncs with mine. Sometimes in I, the quiet, she whispers, You were meant to harvest me. And I whisper back, But instead I planted you.